Hello, my name is SCHOU JUUL, and I'm a researcher at the University of Southern Denmark. I will be presenting the rationale, method, and result from our study with the title Ethical Issues in Dementia Guidelines for People with Dementia and Informal Caregivers in Denmark. This is a qualitative thematic synthesis. This study was conducted as part of a more elaborate research project about ethical dilemmas in dementia care called Dementia ID. Part of the merit of the project was to provide tools for people with dementia and their informal caregivers to better handle ethical issues whenever they encounter them. We know that dementia inevitably will raise several ethical issues, which will make decision-making complex and difficult. Moreover, we also know that caregivers also found themselves being ill-equipped for deciding what's right and wrong when confronted with ethical issues. This has been reported not only in the ethnographical study conducted as part of Dementia ID, but also by various reports on the matter. For instance, the report Dementia Ethical Issues by the National Council of Bioethics mentioned it, as well as Alzheimer Europe's ethical dilemmas faced by carers and people with dementia. We know that there exist several dementia-specific guidelines out there. However, the extent to which such guidelines addresses ethical issues and offers guidance is unclear. The aim of this study is therefore to determine exactly this. To which extent, in part, do guidelines for people with dementia and their informal caregivers address ethical issues? What issues do they address, and which recommendations do they offer for addressing the issues? Because we wanted to include as many guidelines as possible, we decided to employ two distinct data collection methods. First, literature searches on public web search engines, as well as public libraries. Secondly, data collection from select organizations which provide guidelines for our target groups. This data collection took place from November 2020 throughout January 2021. All guidelines were sorted according to our selection criteria following the Prism diagram shown. In short, the guidelines had to be relatively new, had to be targeted people with dementia and their informal caregivers, published in a public source, for instance, municipalities and dementia-specific organizations, and so on. Moreover, the guidelines had to be relatively brief and concise and in an online or in-print PDF form. To identify ethical content in the guidelines, we use an analytical framework informed by Caregivers' 4 principles of bioethical ethics, as well as ethical issues found in Street and others, full spectrum of ethical issues in dementia care. Out of the 59 guidelines passing the formal eligibility criteria, 15 guidelines passed the controlling criterion for content of ethical dilemmas. Those 15 guidelines underwent a meticulous inductive coding to classify specific ethical issues. We conducted a thematic analysis, parting from respectively Maguire and Delahunt's, as well as Brown and Clark's framework for thematic analysis. In this way, we were able to organize the ethical issues present into overarching themes. While only a limited number of the guidelines had significant ethical content, we were able to elicit 4 transversal ethical themes in the 15 guidelines. First, there must emerge a theme about openness and disclosure in relation to the disease. Many of the guidelines speak of general tendency among people with dementia and the relative to attempt to hide symptoms early on and keep their diagnosis a secret, as seen in the quote below. Another theme concerns difficulties with accepting dependence on others and the need for support. People struggle with their pride, fear of stigma, or simply might have a preference for non-interference by others. For instance, a person with dementia might insist on living at home for a prolonged period of time, or a family caregiver might find professional support inadequate, as demonstrated in the quote. The third theme we found concerned dignity and especially changes in what is perceived as being dignified behavior and communication. As the disease progresses, the approach to interacting with the person with dementia also changes. This might give rise to several ethical questions, such as when is manipulation permissible? For instance, is it okay to engage in lies if the truth really hurts? Or what is the adequate threshold for taking over, as mentioned in the quote? The most dominant in terms of volume ethical theme in the guidelines were by far decision-making and the promotion of autonomy of people with dementia. 2 distinct aspects of this issue gives rise to ethical problems in dementia. One concerns the everyday decision-making. Here, the guidelines highlight that continual involvement of people with dementia is important, which is highly uncontroversial, as demonstrated in the first quote. The other concerns decisions about the future, to which many guidelines argue that one might preserve autonomy for a longer time and relieve stress among family carers by making such decision. This is what the second quote shows. So, what are the implications of this study? Well, first of all, further studies should try to elicit the extent to which ethical guidance are being provided and the needs of the target group are being met elsewhere. Due to our limited scope, we cannot rule out that needs are not being met. However, our study suggests that needs are at least not being met in the guidelines, suggesting that we need more focus on ethical issues in those. So in conclusion, we should continue to make efforts in providing guidance in ethical decision-making because we have a strong reason to believe that this is needed. Thank you for your time.